Hello again, fellow tea tasters. Walker Tea Review. I'm Jason Walker. We're looking at a green tea today. We're going to be going ahead through the process of preparing this tea, appreciating this tea, and talking about the real taste of this tea. We don't really get into I like versus I don't like. We talk about the benefits or the redeeming qualities or the negatives of a tea. So we kind of look at that from a perspective of what a tea can bring to us, what we can appreciate and find in a good tea. We've got our green tea here. We've got a little bit of basic equipment. When you get into tea tasting, if you want your tea to taste right, you have to have the right equipment. Not necessarily expensive equipment, but a few things that would really help you draw out the best. And of course, once you have that equipment, then you also need to be able to use it well. We're using a gaiwan, which is a very traditional, very standard tea making tool. Everybody, I would advise anyone who's going to get really into tea tasting to get a gaiwan and experiment, learn to use it. If you need information on tea tasting equipment, there's the link right up above, which tells you about how to taste or join a tea tasting, where you'll get information about upcoming teas we're going to be tasting together, and a little bit of information about equipment. Now, what you see I've done here is I've got out a regular teaspoon, and it's a pretty lumpy, full-sized tea, taking up a lot of space, not very compact, so that's why I'm going to just kind of sprinkle it in to give you an idea of just about how much. This is about a 4-ounce gaiwan. Gaiwan basically means a covered bowl in Chinese, and we want to cover up the bottom of that of the bowl here. And that actually should be enough. That was a pretty overflowing spoon there, so we're going to be able to return some to our tin here. Cover that up for just a moment. Our water has been brought to a nearly full boil. It started to bubble up, but it hasn't started really that rolling, churning aspect. And then it's been cooling here for 45 seconds, I would say. I'm going to kind of swirl this water around so it makes the leaves flow and swirl around. You don't have dry leaves floating at the top of the water. We'll get this out of the way. Cover our leaves for a while. And when we go through a tea tasting, we go through the dry leaf, the wet leaf, and the liquor. We introduce the tea as well. So this one is from Adagio. It is their DongshanDolce. It is, as we said, a green tea, a sample size like this. Is available for $3 on Adagio's website. Their information on their website tells us that this particular tea is from Zhejiang province. Doesn't give a whole lot of background about the tea other than that. But we're going to go ahead and go through some of the aspects of the dry leaf and make some comments. Okay, first off, you're getting a bit of some characteristic green tea leaf type smells. There's a hint of the lemony aspect that can come out in green teas as they slightly begin to kind of oxidize. But the oxidation is stopped very quickly, so tea stays green. You get lemony smells. Heavier, I would say heavier than what I smelled in previous notes I made about this tea. So you're getting a little bit of a little bit of a lemony aspect, a little bit of a sweet clover type smell, and just a tinge of a kind of a celery note to it. Although that one's very subdued. So this one does have some fragrance to it. When you look at the dry leaf, you are seeing, let me set this here on the lid for just a minute, you are seeing things like leaves connected to a little bit of the tip of the stem here, very delicate branch aspect there, colors of kind of a greenish blue. Here we go, we got 2 leaves connected to what looks like could have been a bud at one point. Okay, you are also getting, I want to save these actually, we're also getting some kind of tips, needle-like buds there, fuzzy with and silvery in color. The newer, most delicate tips, leaves of the plant that have basically not yet opened. Okay, so those are worth looking at. I'm gonna again kind of keep these over to the side so that we can look at them later if we want to appreciate them again. So set those in there. Talk about our wet leaf as well. Set that here. Now we're going to be pouring, of course, so that we can look at our wet leaf. We use a wine glass simply because it allows us to stick our nose into the glass, get a deep smell. Of course, by being clear, we are actually able to look at the colors together. And with a guy one, remember, getting good tea requires some skill and some basic equipment. So we're kind of swirling the leaves around. This is something you can do just to kind of get an idea of what the liquor looks like, how thoroughly it's been steeped, how well the color has diffused. So middle finger and thumb on the rim here, index finger on the top. Other fingers back here for a little bit more support. And we pour just like this. We've angled the lid just enough so that we can pour through the bottom end and allow air to come in through the top over here. There we go. Give it a shake. Get those last few drops to come out. Set that over to the side because we're going to give this tea a smell. Talk a little bit about its wet leaf. Beany notes. Lima bean, a little bit of green bean in there. That's characteristic of several green teas that have gone through either a firing process or a roasting process. These smells can get drawn out and come out with when the leaves are steeped. Now still a little bit of a kind of a spinachy / asparagus sweetness coming out of this. Okay, and when you look at the wet leaf, you are seeing leaves that have, let me pull this one, hope it stays together. Yeah, there we go. As we said, leaf attached by stem to another leaf, potential possibly a bud or a bud that used to be there in the middle. So we'll set that out for just a moment. Let's pull out some of these more delicate. They're all coming. Okay, here's one leaf that has not fully unfurled. I mean, you can kind of unfurl it gently with your fingers, which is a sign of how tightly rolled. That gives us a clue that with the second steeping there would be a little bit more flavor because it's so tightly wound. All that flavor didn't get steeped out in the first steeping. Okay. Tips. Yeah, here we are. Nice little bud there. Colors have gone from, we had a bit of a green-blue in our dry leaf. The steeping process has given us kind of a greenish with a slightly leaning over towards the yellowish, so it's a bit more brighter looking, a little more vibrant in its appearance. So that takes care of our wet leaf. Of course, let's go to the part that most people proceed directly to, and that's the liquor. So we're going to look at this color. That's a pretty light color, yellowish green, a little bit over more towards the yellow than the green. Very light, almost unnoticeable type notes in the fragrance. I was able to draw off a little more flavor this time and aroma than I was in previous tastings. So that's one thing that I'm kind of pausing here to note. So you need a good water temperature, plenty of warmth. You need to get a pretty good density of leaf in order to draw out enough flavor to make it noteworthy. Light clover note, a little bit of a tinge of sweetness. The body's quite thin actually, you get this watery type feel in the back. Not a lot of smoothness there at all. The aftertaste drops off fairly quickly. You're left with a very light, nearly non-existent astringency, drying feeling in your mouth. Anything I left out? Again, sweetness, if there is any, it's clover type. In previous notes, I made note of a kind of a spinachy type sweetness in there. As we talked about before, yeah, a very light broth body. Yeah, I would say I would take that for a green tea. This has a medium, well, I should say light to medium, favoring the light side of a broth or of a texture to this. So astringency, you talked about a little bit in the aftertaste comes out, but that aftertaste is quite fleeting, dissipates very quickly. So when we look at this tea from our dry leaf that had a little bit of some bluish green in color, some sweetness and lemony notes in the dry leaf, some fuzzy buds there as well. Then we went over to our wet leaf, had a bit of that typical lima bean, green bean aroma. Leaves that a few of them tended to stay wrapped, which would mean you could draw out possibly a second steeping that would be closer than some other teas that fully open, as far as having that second steeping that is as strong as the first. Previous tastings, it stayed about roughly the same, dropped off maybe a little bit. Leaves that were good arrangement. I mean, you've got two leaves in a bud there, so that's standard and what is expected. Wet leaf, or I should say liquor, fairly light in the aftertaste, quite weak really in the aftertaste. Aromas that were very gentle, not a lot of personality to this tea really, and so the broth of the body, faint to none, I would say. So we look at this tea, even for a green tea, it just doesn't really have that full package, that total package that we're looking for. So that's why we give this tea an 83. It's not terrible. It has some kind of some notes and aspects to appreciate, but it's just not fully there. Again, this was Adagio's DongshanDolce. Check it out in a fresher tin, or a fresher arrival of shipment, I should say, that could bring a little bit more, but don't expect a lot more. So again, this was Walker Tea Review. Glad you could join us, and come back again, share your tea tasting experiences with us.